So up until now at Hack Your Future, you've learned how to use HTML and CSS to create elements on a web page, to style them in a specific way, to style specific elements. After that, you've learned about JavaScript, some of the syntax around JavaScript, how to use functions, objects, a lot of the basics that come with that. And in JavaScript too, what we're going to focus on is composing all of that together so that you can use your JavaScript to dynamically update HTML. And that's how we're going to make interactive websites. Now, before you can actually get too much into doing that, it's helpful to understand where your code is running and why we're able to do this sort of thing. So when I say where your code is running, generally you're either going to be running code in the browser on the client, or you're going to be running code in the server. And I think it's difficult to sometimes reason about what the server is because it can mean a lot of things. I generally like to simplify it, or at least you can simplify it now. You can think of server code as stuff that's just running directly on your computer. And when you're running code in the server, it's hard to understand because when I say running on your computer, isn't all your code already saved there? But you can think of it like you're going to be given the tools to be able to actually interact with your computer. One such way would be saving files to your computer. So you've got access to a tool that lets you read to your files to your computer, write files to your computer, update files on your computer, which sounds trivial, but in the browser, which is another context that we'll mainly be working in, you don't have those sort of luxuries. However, working within the browser, you have a completely different environment here. And it's in this environment that you can access everything from the URL, so we know the location of where we're at, the tabs if you really wanted to, and among other things, you've got access to every single element within this web page that we're seeing here so that you can interact with it and update it as necessary based on what's going on from the user side of things. So to access all of this stuff, anything you can do within your browser, we actually get given a big JavaScript object that's globally available to us within the browser called window. So if I just type window into our console here and I hit enter, it's going to be smart enough to spit that out, and we can actually see all of the way too many properties available to us on window that actually let us interact with the browser. The most important one that we're going to touch on in the next few lessons is this one document here. And you can see when I highlight document, it makes the whole page blue. You'll remember from our HTML page days, or working with the HTML, that we've got the inspector tool over here that lets us highlight the different elements on the page. And we can actually look to see what the contents are as a way of debugging. And when we highlight them, they turn blue, right? So if we go back to our console here and we highlight the document, that's almost the same concept. By highlighting it, it's showing us everything below the search bar here. That's going to be the document that we are able to work with and manipulate. Now, when it comes to actually starting a new project so that you can combine your HTML and CSS and JavaScript together, it's going to be a very familiar experience. So I'm going to go over to Visual Studio Code now. You can see I've just got an HTML, so I've just got an index.html, and I've got some code spit out already, and I can actually just open this. Maybe I can just open it in the browser, and maybe we can open up the Finder. We can go to my desktop there, and we can just try and find our index file. Oh, here it is, and then we'll open this, and this should just open up in the browser, and we can do that fine. And this is not going to change. Like even if I add code to this, we can add another p tag in here. Hey, and I save that. Nothing changes because I've just opened this file and that's all it knows. But if I refresh it, the browser is going to go check to see if there's anything changed, and we see something new there again. So this isn't anything out of the ordinary. We've worked with HTML before. A little tip when you're setting up your HTML files, because a lot of this stuff like this doc type, the HTML, honestly, you don't really need to remember that because you're pretty much going to do the same thing every time. One little tip in VS Code is you can delete all this. You can do Shift ! And if you hit Tab, it's going to automatically generate a lot of that stuff for you. So we're going to be using this for most of the examples, although there's not going to be too many in this lecture, because it's just important to focus on the browser environment and understanding that that's why we can manipulate our JavaScript code. Now, we can put another H1 back in here and just say new code, hit save. So that's working. Now, I'm going to use a little tool that's actually called Live Server, which you may have already installed in previous classes as a way of having a refresh on save with our code. And it's called Live Server because that's an example of our server, right? And all that Live Server does is it's got access to our computer. It can read the files on our computer, which means it can read when there's a change in the file and constantly present us with a link that we can access so we can see the changes going on. So that's one example of a difference between running code in the browser versus the server. Is this server that we've got running, it could be built in JavaScript for all we know. It has access to the information on our computer in this context. So I'm going to go ahead, go to extensions over here. I might already have it installed, which I do. So live server is the one we're going to be using. Oh, sorry, that's live share. It's live server that we want. Which I don't have installed. So live server by Ritwick is the one I'll be using. It's installing now. Now it's enabled. So I should be able to go back here, open up the files. Now if I right click on this, I can open with live server, which should automatically open code in a new window for us. So you can see a bit different here. Before, we're reading code in our browser directly from our files, which I kind of said we couldn't do in the browser, which is a bit different from the server. So ignore that kind of small nuance for a second. But now we've got our server running and it's serving us our index.html page. And now we can edit changes here. And they'll be reflected right when we save. So I'm going to put a new p tag that says live server. We're going to save that there. And now we've got our code that'll update on save. So I'm just going to put these side by side so it's a bit easier to follow what's going on. Now, if we want to compose our HTML, CSS together, we learned we could do that by adding a link in our HTML head. Let's see if I can remember what it is. Link, we've got some autocomplete here. So if we do link:CSS, it'll automatically generate a link for us in our head with the relationship style sheet and then a href. Style.css. So we can create that now. And we'll do style.css. And we know how to make classes, so I'll make a class here, and then I'm going to make a class called, we can call it green. Let's call it green text. And then we'll say color green. So then that way, any code we apply this class to, it will make the color of that text green. I'm going to go in here. We'll apply this to our p tag class. Oh, it's just green text. I already forgot how to spell it. Green text. Save. So now it's a little bit small here, but we can see that this is turned green. So we know how to link up CSS. This is nothing new. And you may, in the previous classes, have already seen how to link up JavaScript in your code. We can do something very similar. We've got something called a script tag, which you can read about online in the documentation, and I highly recommend. For everything that you read, you try and read the documentation. It might feel overwhelming at times, but it's a way to slowly and progressively build on the things you know. And I like to use the MDN documentation. So that's from Mozilla. It's very high quality. So I'm going to type in MDN script HTML. And that's going to take us, the first link there is going to be about the script tag, which is HTML tag that is used to embed executable code. So in this case, the executable code that we're going to be using is JavaScript code. And we can do that. We can do here, we can have script tag, script like that, and we can open it up. And now suddenly within these braces, everything we've learned about JavaScript, we can put in there directly in our HTML. So in previous classes, you may have done this in a separate JavaScript file. You may already be used to this, but we can do something as simple as console.log, Braden was here. We can save that. We can go back to our document. I'm going to open up the console again. So in Google Chrome, you can do that by either, I'm on a Mac and it's Option Command J, which I think on a PC would be Alt Control J, or you can access it through here, going to the, I think it's more tools and developer tools. So we can see we've got the console.log Braden was here. So our JavaScript is working. But of course, if we want to, if we don't want to write all of our JavaScript in the head tag of our HTML file. So we can, again, make things a bit more clean. I'm going to delete this script tag and I'm going to make it a self-closing tag, which we can do by just doing that, which isn't working. Do script. Actually, we can see it's already going to give us some autocomplete here. We've got the script : source, which will give us that. So the source attribute is where we can link to our actual JavaScript file so that we can keep things a bit separate and it makes it a bit easier to work with. So I'm going to make a file called index.js. We're going to add that console.log back in there, index.js file. We're going to link it right here, and this is index.js. It'll autocomplete us again. And now we should be able to give it a refresh, and we see we're getting the console.log. So everything's available in that JS file now. Now, what we could do, just to prove that we're in the browser environment, is we can access everything in the window here. So I showed you in the console here, we've got access to this window, but we've also got access to that window in our JavaScript code. So we go window here and we console.log that. We're going to get the same object that we got before here, which also means that we've got access to the document. So if we go window.document, which we can see here, we can access that document. We can see it gives us hashtag document, or that's almost like accessing it via the ID of an element, which you should have experience with from the HTML class. You can see it's actually going to spit out the HTML tag exactly as we have it here, which is kind of insane, right? So this code here we didn't write because this is, you can see it's given us a thing, code injected by live server, but everything's the exact same. We've got our link. We've got our meta tags. We can actually look at it side by side. It's literally spitting out the same HTML file. So in the coming lessons, we're going to be talking about the document a lot, but it's important to know that we've got access to this document. And the document is simply referring to the HTML document that we create. And using our JavaScript, we're going to be able to add elements to this, take away elements, create new elements. There's a ton of things we can do. In the coming lessons, we're going to learn about the document object model and how we can use the document object model to build upon everything that we've just seen here. Now, the last little piece of information that I'm going to give you, it's just a syntactical thing really, is it's so common to want to access the document on window. Document itself is also available to us as a global variable. Along with, I think actually most properties on window you can just access directly like this. We can see if I just console.log document, we get the same thing there. Now, in the next video, we're going to learn about the document object model and figure out how we can start interacting with all the HTML that we see here using JavaScript.